think I like the Heat to beat the Mavericks, although I'm a Mavericks fan. So thank you. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's a great question. I mean, first of all, yeah, ESPN, I think, is not only in a lot of ways more relevant than CNN, it also gets a hell of a lot higher ratings than CNN. But to get to the core of the question, it's like one of the reasons why we dedicated the film to Howard Zinn, and one of the reasons why Howard Zinn is a historian who meant so much to me, was because he had this line where he said, it doesn't matter who's sitting in the White House, it matters who's sitting in. And the point he's trying to make is that like the application of grassroots pressure is how change happens. And to think that it's going to happen by accident or because we write letters to our congresspeople is not the way that you've seen social change happen in the United States. And one of the things that I think you see is that when you see movements of grand social upheaval in the history of the United States, you've seen sports be a part of that. I mean, sports has been a part of it, I think, for several reasons. And one of the reasons why I think it relays itself, why struggle connects with sports in such electric fashion is first of all, who actually plays sports and the communities that they come from. And also because I think like the platform itself in sports then becomes very powerful in periods of social unrest. And I keep thinking of this line that Stokely Carmichael said about Muhammad Ali, where he said Muhammad Ali was more dangerous than I could ever be, not because he had better politics than me, but because of the audience that he could command. And so it's like, it's not easy to get to athletes, but like just giving, like you said about like, I don't know if like writing a letter to an athlete would be the way to go, but there are a lot of instances recently of police brutality with athletes. There have been a lot of instances where athletes get tased and things like that because police officers, I don't want to shock anybody here, but they tend to pull over black men in nice cars. I'm sorry if that shocks people. And I also don't want to shock people, but the male athlete tends to have a little bit of an ego. Once again, don't want to shock people. And you can imagine how this is a combustible combination. You know, get out of that car. Are you kidding me? Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? And then next thing you know, taser. And what we did in DC was, this happened with Chris Webber. This is years ago, but I always love this story. Chris Webber was playing for the Wizards, and he got maced because he wouldn't get out of his car fast enough for the police. And so we went to the next game, and we hung a banner that said, "Stop police brutality, defend Chris Webber." And it took them a while before they grabbed it from us. But I think if there are ways, but a more recent example is last year, one of the reasons why 2 dozen athletes, Major League Baseball players, spoke out against the All-Star game being in Arizona and the laws in Arizona was because you had demonstrations in 20 different cities. And some of them were really big. Like every time the Arizona Diamondbacks went to a city, there was a demonstration last season. I mean, the ESPN didn't cover this, but like in San Francisco, they had 700 people march on the stadium when the Diamondbacks were in town. And the lead banner said, anti-immigrant racists are worse than Dodgers fans, which was a great banner to have. And so I think there is something to be said about bringing activism to the park and that it can work. I mean, I'm not advocating anything like this, but my buddy Gustavo, who heads up a group called Casa de Maryland, which is an immigrant rights group in Maryland, we protested outside the stadium last year, about 100 of us, when the Diamondbacks were in town. We hung banners from the stadium, we hung banners from the parking lot, all this stuff. It forced the media to ask the players questions about it. And then Gustavo and a couple other people ran out on the field. And they were wearing t-shirts like "End SB 1070" and oh my God, this security guard ran after them, and the security guard, you know, just hadn't missed too many meals. And he dived at Gustavo, but slipped, and he did a belly flop, and it became like a YouTube sensation. And all was like anti-immigrant protesters start melee and all this stuff like that. And Gustavo, by the way, Gustavo was banned for life from the stadium, even though he helped pay for the stadium because it was publicly funded, which is ironic enough. And afterwards, Gustavo said to me, he's like, Gustavo's in his mid-30s, and he said, "My God, I've been an activist for like 20 years, and I've never gotten more publicity, more coverage, or more interview requests than just by running on the field and having a big guy belly flop trying to tackle him." And all that speaks to is just like they have built up this cultural platform. They've built it up because of the money it can provide, because of the way that sports attracts people. There's nothing wrong with us trying to use it. It's not like the Pentagon's not trying to use it. So why shouldn't we? Yes, sir.
One of the ways film did something we would have liked to have seen in the film is the Olympic boycotts in 1980 and 1984, and in general, of course, like how the Olympics were, how sports seemed to be a theater in the Cold War.
Yeah, that was part 8. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that would have been really fascinating to have in the film, and particularly though, just to explore like the athletes who were actually disappointed by Jimmy Carter pulling the games and what it did to their dreams and what they trained for. I think it would have been really interesting. I'm just glad we settled Afghanistan in 1980 so we don't have to deal with it now. So that was good. Yes.
Kind of a two-part question, but one, first, with this, what kind of backlash have you received, and if you have any? And then second, you situate this along with like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, who embraced the backlash, and they said that's what we need. We need to be with the enemy. We need them. We don't want to just fight back with them. We need them. And so I'm curious if A, you've gotten backlash, and B, how are you responding and trying to incorporate them into this?
Well, first, just really quick to answer the second part, because I think it's important, especially for educators here. Is like when this was something that we insisted on when we made this. Is like the little clip of like Martin Luther King being like, "I'm tired of injustice in the world," or the clip from like the women's strike for equality and things like that. I mean, it is about bringing this stuff to a new audience and being like, no, Martin Luther King is not just the person who's on a McDonald's commemorative cup, and Malcolm X is not a postage stamp, and there was once this thing called a women's strike for equality. And so to like actually use sports to reopen like all these parts of American history which young people just aren't taught. I mean, it's crazy. Like, we've shown the film to young people, they don't know who Pat Tillman is. I mean, and why should they? I mean, if they're 17 years old, that was all going down when they were 10 years old. So we have our work cut out for us in terms of like just basic historical education. And in terms of backlash, I mean, there was, there's definitely been something. I mean, but I was on ESPN last week, and before that it had been a long, long time. And I'd sent them all copies of the film, and ESPN's a weird kind of structure. You know, it's like the Borg in Star Trek. You know, it's just like, you know, you try to fight it, and it grows more powerful and bigger, and seizes your strength. And it's like, I thought I knew enough individuals. There are a lot of individuals who work there who have politically progressive ideas and who believe a sense of mission about changing sports. Number one in my mind is a guy named Tom Farrey, who writes brilliant critiques of like youth sports. Wrote a book called Game On, which everybody should read. But at the same time, it also is ESPN. And so when it came out, it was just like radio silence for months. And I knew they'd seen it, and that was kind of that. And they heard that they didn't like this thing we did with ESPN, the magazine, particularly pissed them off. I could have gotten nastier with that too, because not only is it all men, but were you catching like the homoeroticism in those pictures too? I mean, it's like, I don't know if that's something they want discussed openly and how they do things, but and also the 6 women in 5 years, I believe 3 of them are Maria Sharapova. So it's also you know, it's even more disgraceful than we laid it out. But you know, it's a weird thing. It's like I've never been paid by ESPN for doing anything, and I don't know if one could be and still be able to talk critically about sports, and that's how powerful they are. It's like because you can't talk critically about sports without talking about ESPN. And that's a dangerous thing. I mean, it's like they're too big to fail, except I think their failure would benefit our collective humanity. Are any of them here? Okay. Yes.